Anger is like a light on the dashboard of our emotional car saying, hey, something's wrong. Check under the hood. So if we can start to see it as a barometer, it's not a reflection of us being bad or being flawed. It's a warning.
Welcome to the Lara Jane Layton Show. This podcast is for you, the person who keeps putting others first. Your self-talk has held you back. You no longer need to take a second seat. Let's explore ways to overcome self-doubt. You can silence that inner bully voice and achieve your full potential. Here's your host, Lara Jane.
Welcome to the show, friend. I am here with my new best friend, and her name's Bronwyn. And we are going to talk today about anger and how we heal that relationship we have with anger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, anger's okay, but it's not good to have it take over our lives and just be angry forever. So how do we work with that? How do we remove that and move past and have a beautiful life? I mean, anger-free life is amazing. And so what causes anger? What makes us hold on to it? How do we let go? So Bronwyn's going to talk to us about that. The information about her is in the show notes. So Bronwyn, help me have a loving relationship with my anger.
Yeah. So I love that the focus here is on having a healthy relationship with our anger. I think that starts with one, not seeing anger as shameful. A lot of us grew up to feel shamed, maybe by our parents, either implicitly or explicitly when we showed any sign of anger. And so we still kind of carry that, whether we know it or not. And we feel like maybe, especially as women, that it's not okay to be angry. But I like to say there's no such thing as an angry person because we're all humans and all humans have anger. And that means that's like saying that's a breathing person, an angry person. We all breathe and we all have anger. So it's really about healing our relationship to our anger, not viewing it as shameful or bad, not viewing it only as volatile, because certainly that's the anger that makes the waves and gets the sensationalism. But a lot of us just hold our anger inside our bodies too. And that's actually in a way more toxic, believe it or not. And it haunts us. And I like to say that even though anger is invisible, it's just as real as this laptop I'm talking to you on. It's just as real. And it doesn't just dissipate. It doesn't just disappear into thin air. It literally stores in our bodies and it makes us sick. And as a therapist, I see this and I've experienced it too. I see it mainly in things like insomnia or sleep issues. I see it in headaches or migraines. I see it in digestive, a lot of that, digestive issues. And then I see it in just things that we call mental health issues like anxiety and depression, because what those both are in my book are suppressed anger that we are not in relationship to, but we're just kind of disassociating from, and it's held in our bodies and it's making us sick. So, number one, just going, you know what? It's okay to be angry. For example, let's say you came really late to our meeting today. And for me, just to recognize, I think I'm pretty annoyed with Laura Jane because she came late. I'm just going to feel that in my body. I'm just going to feel that annoyance in my body. Where do I feel it? I feel it in my chest. I feel really annoyed. What does that anger want to say in fantasy? I can give word to it in fantasy. I could say, you know what, Laura Jane, you always do this. And I want to break up with you, whatever. In fantasy, I can have fun with it. That's me connecting to my anger and no harm, no foul. So that's number one, is just reorienting our relationship to it. I don't have to hurt you with my words. I don't have to be violent. I don't have to be explosive, but I can attune to it. I can self-attune to my anger. And then step two is our feelings tell us our need. So what does that anger want to do? Because the word emotion, it wants to move us. Emotions want to move us into action. So what is my anger giving me insight and vital information that I need in this situation? Is it that I need to say, hey, Laura Jane, this is like the third time this has happened and it's not okay. So that's me being assertive, channeling my anger out of my body in a healthy way.
I was just wondering, how do we define anger in the first place? Like, how do we even know how anger initially is generated? And you talked a little bit about I was late for
Yeah.
a meeting, and that sounded like um, me having an expectation, it not being meant, and then me being frustrated, but it really had nothing to do with the other person, right? All people should be on time for a meeting. So is it missed expectations that causes our
Mm,
anger?
that's a great question. Yeah. So, yes, we have these things called expectations that are usually implicit. We have no idea we have them until someone doesn't meet them, right? And so, the closer that person is to us, the higher those expectations are. And therefore, the more we feel not just angry, but betrayed when they hurt us. That's why no one gets a depression or a depressive episode from someone cutting them off on the freeway, because we don't know that person and we don't have much expectation of them except to be maybe a courteous driver. But, if it's a spouse, if it's a parent, if it's a best friend, if it's a boss, and they are deviating from our expectations, that's a betrayal. And that, man, if we don't attune to that, if we don't honor that we feel that betrayal and allow ourselves to be angry and learn to channel it out of our bodies in a healthy way, we will definitely suffer depression, anxiety, again, insomnia, migraines, digestive disorders, even I believe autoimmune disorders can be caused from chronic feelings of betrayal. So yes, expectation is huge.
So, what makes my expectations right? Let's go to the simple one of the
Mm,
toilet seat. I want it down, you know, and if
mhm,
it's up, I'm going to get frustrated and angry because my expectation wasn't met. But
mhm.
who ever said that that was the right way? So how do I know if my expectation is just stupid in the first place?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say first and foremost, we kind of feel it in our gut. And in fact, that's where we feel betrayed is in our gut. That's why I believe a lot of us have digestive issues is we're disassociating from those feelings of betrayal. Um, and if someone, if we've communicated something to someone, that's an explicit expectation. If they've said, yeah, I'm definitely going to put the toilet seat down. I'm sorry. If we communicate, hey, you didn't do that. Whoops, sorry. And we hear an apology, if we hear some kind of self awareness, some kind of ownership of the infraction, then we can go, okay, thank you. Thank you for apologizing. I know that's hard for you to remember, whatever. But if that's, and something emblematic of a larger pattern, and it usually is, and it's a pattern, it's not a one time event. So if the toilet seat keeps, not being put down, and we're talking about my spouse, and that's kind of emblematic of him just not seeming to care about my feelings in a lot of respects, then that's a big betrayal. And maybe I don't want to admit that. Maybe I don't want to feel that, but it's in my body and I'm feeling it. And now I'm anxious or I'm depressed or I'm struggling to sleep. And so again, when we dissociate from those feelings are there for a reason. They're there to give us wisdom. And a lot of us don't want to know that. That's going to, create some uncertainty and some anxiety, right?
Yes. It's a good way of looking at it. And betrayal is when we've already communicated and set those expectations. If you go into a relationship or into work and you don't know these things, it's an unconscious betrayal. And until
Mhm.
it's like, I'm going to forgive you for not knowing that I had a boundary here. But,
Mm,
that's what a job description's for. That's what,
mhm.
understanding the culture or mission statements are is setting that expectation of how this organization works. and knowing what you'll be responsible for. But I've heard so many people go, that's not in my job description. I can't do it, you know? And okay, if you're a union, that's the way it is. You do not cross the line because you only do what's in your job description. But a lot of us aren't in a union. And so we do. Like, you just asked me to work all these extra hours and I have other things to do. And you are violating this boundary that I set that I'm only going to work less than 9 hours a day, you know? And if you can communicate that, it helps set that boundary, but it's going to be crossed. And it's how do we respond to it?
Right.
Yes, it's a betrayal, but
yeah, it is. So I say we respond to it by feeling it, by saying, I'm feeling angry and that's okay. I'm feeling betrayed and that's okay to feel. That doesn't make me bad. What do these emotions want to move me to do? So like I said, assertiveness, like you're, kind of insinuating like, hey, that's a boundary, and boundaries can be all shapes and sizes. So I could have like, you know what, I'm going to look for a job elsewhere. That could be a boundary. It could be a boundary of it, kind of like an ultimatum. Like if this continues, this is you can expect from me, whatever leverage I have on my end as an employee. And it can also be accountability, in a job situation, accountability. If we document again, these patterns and we go above that person's head, or we bring them directly to our boss and say, look at this pattern. I've documented this for quite a while now. We have more leverage there. And so we have all kinds of choices. But I think what I really want everyone to hear, most importantly, is that when we don't allow those emotions to move us forward, our anger to move us in those healthy channels, we will betray ourselves. And when we betray ourselves, we suffer in all kinds of ways. And again, as a therapist, I see this every day. People come to me and they're like, I don't know why I'm depressed. And I'm like, well, when did you last betray yourself? And it is every time. And I talk about this a lot on my own podcast. My journey, the reason I went into becoming a therapist is I fell into a very, very serious depressive episode myself. And I was desperate for a good therapist. And I went to many of them and I couldn't find a good one. I felt betrayed actually by my therapist. And so I remember sitting there in the chair thinking to myself, Bronwyn, you are hardly functioning right now, but I still think you might make a better therapist to you than this person in front of you. And I actually went back to school and got my second master's degree in counseling so I could do that. But looking back in retrospect, both my very serious depressive episodes, I've had two, they were both times where I absolutely betrayed myself because I didn't have a healthy relationship with my anger at when I was betrayed. And, sometimes when we sink into that, we betray ourselves more and more and more. And it just like creates this horrible cycle. So my goal for, my listeners, my clients is that we have to be true to ourselves. We really do. We have to learn to trust ourselves and be true to ourselves because that is not a selfish act. That is a life-giving act to everyone around us and to ourselves.
I think that's amazing. And it's like when I do betray myself, then you get frustrated that this summer, I had some reoccurring health problems that came back. And I went into one of those depressions, just like, oh my God, I can't even take care of myself. I'm not even good to myself. And how is this? And it took weeks to get where I was at peace with it's just an experience that I needed to go through and I experienced it and I can move on. So it took a while, but at the same time, you go, oh, I never want to do that again. And I hate the nevers. I shouldn't use the word hate and the musts and the things that are infinite, because if I need to experience it again, maybe I want to, maybe it's something I'm learning from. And I just have to let go. I have to look at the experiences that I'm going through as this is for me. This is
Well,
for me. And what am I
yeah,
learning?
right. I do see every hardship as an opportunity, but it's an opportunity not just to learn in the, theoretical sense. It's an opportunity to learn to trust ourselves, to learn to do right by ourselves. And that takes chutzpah. Like that takes, really like, what am I doing? Kind of like a wake up, a
Mhm.
wake up, like I've been betraying myself. It takes kind of that realization, that epiphany, like I've been betraying myself and I can't do that anymore. And so I believe we participate in our own, liberation, if you will, in that way by learning to heal our relationship with ourselves and trusting ourselves and doing right by ourselves. And as we do that, we become really flourishing individuals. And, I like that word flourish. It makes me think of a huge shade tree. And, you think of a tree, and when a tree flourishes, it provides shade and shelter and refuge to humans and so many creatures, and oftentimes fruit as well. And when we flourish, we create a better world. So it's a win-win, and it's something that our world needs very much, is for us to all flourish.
And we all get to flourish in our own way.
Mhm.
And if you want to, like, even talking about trees, the deciduous trees are there to shade the earth from the heat. The
Mhm.
evergreen trees are there in the winter to keep, they all have a purpose.
Mhm.
And if everything was a shade tree, look how awful the winters would be.
Mm.
And it's like allowing the shade trees
Mm.
in our personal relationships and allowing the evergreens and allowing
Mm.
the flowers and the bushes and
Mhm.
letting everybody be their own piece of nature
Mm.
and not judge people by, well, I'm a
Mhm.
shade tree and I take care of everybody else and so should you. And the
Mhm.
second we put our experience of what we are on somebody else, we've just broken a trust, an
Mhm.
allowance of allowing everybody their own experiences. And when Lara Jane shows up late for a meeting and you want to be angry, that's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay to say, as a respectful thing, we all have meetings, we all have valuable times, and you should show up on time. But there's also situations that are going to make that not happen.
Mm.
I was in a car accident on the way,
Yeah.
didn't get
Right.
back. And giving people that little tiny bit of grace
Mm.
of there was a reason for this. I know Lara
Right.
Jane's not on purposely being disrespectful. And when we can get to that point of allowance, that expectation kind of fades a little bit.
Mhm.
And there's less reason to be angry at the world. Can you be angry? Yes, no problem. Enjoy the anger because sometimes it's fun. It's like, I'm just going to be mad at you and I'm not going to talk to you for a whole day. And you feel powerful and you feel
Mm.
like you're doing something for it. But it's feeling it. What am I really trying to do? I'm trying to make him hurt as bad as I feel hurt. You know?
Ah, right. Yeah, that's a good point. So, yeah, coming back to that, when we learn to have a healthy relationship with our anger and we channel it out and again, there's just basically those three ways: assertiveness, boundaries, and or accountability. We aren't returning, someone who's being a monster to us. We're not becoming a monster back. So if someone's a monster to me, I'm going to say, hey, I don't feel safe right now with the accusations you're making. I feel like you're attacking me and I don't trust you. You've lost my trust and I need to have a boundary. And those are healthy, assertive things to say. Those aren't being a monster back. We don't return evil for evil. And that's not what anger does. Anger alerts us this person is unsafe, and we can use our words or our boundaries to say, I can't engage with you because I don't feel safe with you, right?
Yes, I agree. But there are a lot of people who have that. You hurt me, I'm going to hurt you.
Yeah.
And the person might not even realize they hurt you because they didn't understand your boundary to start with.
Sure.
And so it's, how do I make that balance where?
Yeah. So that's going to come with each individual relationship. So again, we look for patterns. If I see a one-time thing that you came really late and you're telling me, and I'm asking you, hey, what happened? And you're like, oh, I had a car accident, I'm going to believe you. But if you have a car accident every time we meet and so you're running late, that's a pattern. I'm starting to go, hey, Laura Jane, I'm just not, it's hard to believe that every time you're late, it's because, you're a victim of a car accident. So then we kind of have more savvy, right? And so in each individual relationship, we do kind of have a level of trust that is proportionate to each person, and we based on their how they have been faithful or trustworthy to us in the past or how they haven't, and we can trust our gut on that like things kind of seem a little fishy here, and so yeah, it really is tailor suited for each individual in our lives.
And I could come up with a million excuses, but if I'm late all the time, it's not my priority. It's that it doesn't have to be just a car accident. One day it could be my kids did this. The next day it could be my dog did this. The next day it could be, but if it's a pattern of excuses, you're not putting a priority on the untimeness. And that's when we have the discussion of this is your job. This is an expectation. And here's what I need you to do. And if that priority doesn't change, that's just life. I mean,
That's just life.
pretty much that person's not going to go. I mean, not going to stay employed. But at the same time, you've given them the opportunity. And it's when we can communicate those boundaries, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life or your friends or religious expectations, there are implied boundaries in those situations or expectations.
Yeah.
And, somebody made them up.
And I mean, so I think that's really also a good point too, now that you're saying this. So I'm thinking about how many times, I had a best friend, she passed away, but she was so gracious to me because I really took advantage of her good nature, when we first began as friends. And she would confront me and she'd say, Bronwyn, when you say that, it doesn't feel good. She was really assertive with me. And it helped me. I'm so glad she didn't just give up on me. Because I would have given up on me, honestly. But she was just very assertive, and I would apologize. And I'd say, Julie, I'm so sorry. Um, Thank you for telling me. And I did change, and she saw that. And so I think that's really the bottom line here. If someone is doing something that makes us angry and we confront them in a loving way or a respectful way, and we say, hey, that's not okay. That hurts when you say that, or that feels humiliating or whatever. And if they defend and they deny and maybe even attack us and they try to blame us, well, that's because you did blah, blah, blah. That's not a safe person. But if they respond, they go, oh man, I'm glad you confronted me. And it's embarrassing, actually. It's hard to hear, but I'm glad you said something because I had no idea. Thank you. Or whatever. If they apologize, if they're willing to hear what you're sharing with them, if they're willing to see themselves, even the ugly parts of themselves, and apologize and do better, then that's someone that is a safe person. So I think kind of that's really the bottom line between someone who is safe and not safe, right?
Mm, I like it because really we can be safe and you can't if you don't bring it up. And that's that assertive piece that if I
Yes.
need to be able to bring it up, if this relationship, no matter what kind it is going to continue, it can, your kids, it's not just your spouse. It's not just your kids. It's not just your friends. It's everybody you cross paths with. Now, if somebody butts in line in front of you and you know that that's not right, but you're never going to see the person again,
Yeah.
you can confront it or you can let it go. But if you're going to stew about it for an hour, confront it because it's going to be healthier. if you don't really care, like, oh, well, he must be in a bigger hurry. That's what I do when somebody takes my parking spot or someone runs me off the road. It's like, they must be in a bigger hurry than I am. And I just try to just let it go because I don't know who they are. I can hold on to road rage for the rest of my life. And the next person who did something minor, I could end up chasing them down.
Yeah.
It's like we let things build up and then
Yes.
explode on the wrong person. But if you
That's
do that
right.
assortive piece right when it happens,
That's right.
you can deal with it.
Yeah, I talk about that too. A few months back, my husband and I were going to go out of town for one night, the weekend. So we agreed that we'd clean the house before we left so that way we can come back and just be pieced out the next day. And so we were getting ready, I was cleaning the house and my husband was still on his computer just reading the newspaper. And I was starting to feel annoyed. And then I started to just ignore how annoyed I felt. But then I caught myself. I said, no, don't do that. Because when you do that and he's still on the computer a few minutes later, you're going to be really mean, which is true. So I said, hey, Steve, I'm starting to feel resentful that you're still on the computer when you said you'd help me clean. And he goes, oh, okay. And he shuts the computer and he starts cleaning. And I was like, that's what I needed to do. It was just in the moment. I'm starting to feel resentful. Like, I'm not even going to wait till I feel full-fledged resentment. I'm going to let him know from the get-go. And it worked. And it's those of us who don't have that healthy relationship with anger where we're like, I'm not really angry. It's not a big deal. And we stuff it and then we blow up either on that person or you're right, on other people like our children who least need it and least deserve it. And it hurts them the most, or our pets or whatever. And they're the most vulnerable. And so we really need to be responsible with our anger in that moment with the source of the anger.
Talking through this, it's like, I would say almost every time I lashed out at somebody, it was not the original perpetrator.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I have now taken enough of this. I've let it build up. And someone that so innocently said something and I'll blow up. So it's when we learn to address it and feel it and respond to it.
Yeah.
We prevent that blow up.
Yes. And even if that's someone who we cannot confront directly. So if that person is an unsafe person, which there's a lot of those. So I'll give you another example. My father, I knew I couldn't tell him how I actually felt about, how hurtful he's been to me because he will deny, defend, and attack. And there's so many people like that they're not safe to confront. And a confrontation is not going to bring any resolution, any closure. It's going to make you feel worse leaving it. So we need just to say that's an unsafe person. I'm not going to use assertiveness with them. That doesn't work with someone like that. But what can we do? I wrote him a fantasy letter and I validated it for myself. I had my best friend read it and validate it. And we need to express those feelings and have them validated with people who will validate them because the unsafe person's never going to validate them. And we can trust ourselves. We can know that's right. And then after I wrote that, I sent him it in an email and I just said, until you apologize for all these things, I don't think we're going to have a relationship moving forward. And that felt really good. And I healed my insomnia actually by doing that.
Oh, that is so cool. I mean, you don't know where insomnia comes from until you fixed it. It's like, oh, that was the reason I was up all night again. It's like I stewed and I stewed and I stewed and I didn't let it go. So let's kind of like summarize where we've been today. And I can do it or you can do it. I usually do, but I think
you
you're
go
better.
for it. And maybe I can add anything I feel like needs to be added.
All right. So our topic is anger and how we deal with it. And expectations that we have for ourselves and others are the primary trigger for anger. And when that trigger happens, it's best to take that moment to feel it, to allow it, and to not feel the shame from the anger, and then create our own response, whether we're going to confront the person or write a letter. And then as we do that, we prevent it from happening again. Or if it's the letter of the person you can't, you then can do your own space. I do not have to cross the path with this person as many times. And there's going to be people you can't get away from. And then as we go through this in our relationships, as we start to set those boundaries so that the other person knows our expectations, that articulating that and sharing that is going to help them to know. And if you're starting to feel the anger and you need to have it communicated, we do it right then. And that way we prevent the buildup, that pressure cooker thing. We don't blow up. We leave the spout off and we let the pressure go as it comes in. And then the most important thing is remembering that anger is not bad. It's a normal, natural reaction.
Yeah.
That we are human and experience it. Listen.
Yeah. I like to use the analogy of anger is like a light on the dashboard of our emotional car saying, hey, something's wrong. Check under the hood. So if we can start to see it as a barometer, it's not a reflection of us being bad or being, flawed. It's a warning. It's a barometer saying something needs repair. And our goal, again, isn't to explode. Our goal is to repair and bring resolution to the problem through assertiveness, through boundaries or accountability. Then anger is for the good. And our healing that relationship with anger actually heals our relationship with ourselves.
I love it. So why don't you share with our friend how to get a hold of you, a little bit about yourself, and then what's that one thing they can do today to help make it through another anger episode?
So I'm Bronwyn Schweigerdt. I am a licensed therapist, psychotherapist, and I have a podcast called Angry at the Right Things. And it's all about unpacking this whole thing, our relationship with anger and our relationship with ourselves. I share a lot of stories about my own journey and my learning things the firsthand way, I think, which might be the only way to really learn things. So I just encourage everyone today to see your anger as a sign of health, to learn to trust that your body is speaking to you all the time. Like I said, my insomnia was speaking to me. It was crying out, Bronwyn, break up with your dad. And it wasn't until I did that I've been sleeping like a baby for the last few years. So our bodies are speaking to us. Our anger is part of that communication. It's trying to get our attention and say, hey, bring to resolution, move forward in a healthy way, change things up, bring repair. And as we do that, we become more alive, we become more whole, and we flourish. And that creates a more beautiful world for everyone ultimately.
And I had another thought, and so this might extend the podcast a little bit, but sometimes my anger is directly related to my fatigue. I'm not really angry at the person. I'm just too tired. Just too tired. And my triggers I just go so fast. Sometimes it's step back and take time for myself.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're using it. Use that anger as a reference point of choosing how to respond. Am I really angry at that person, or am I just too tired to deal with this right now?
Yeah.
Like, have you ever said to your kids, don't talk to me right now?
Oh.
It's like, I need a moment. And you kind of spout that anger, but you're not really angry. You're just needing some peace.
That
Find those
boundary,
moments.
the boundary, right? That's a boundary. And it's so healthy to tell your kids, mommy needs a boundary. Mommy's feeling resentful right now. Because our kids need to learn that we matter too.
And that it's okay to share your feelings The older you are, the more you were not allowed to share feelings. And it's just because the generations have changed. I was pretty much brought up, you don't cry, you don't share any of your emotions. You're just a robot. You just act like this and then everything's fine. And, you have to learn. You get to learn. You don't have to. You get to.
You get to.
As you learn through, you find so much more peace in life.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us. This has really been enlightening. It's really helped me approach my own anger in a more holistic way instead of just step back and, think of what I did wrong. Because it's not always what I did wrong. I just responded in a way that wasn't as healthy. And how do I allow both to happen? So thank you for joining. Stay tuned.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And friends, stay tuned for the next episode. We'll talk to you soon.
Are you tired of waking up exhausted? You are not alone. If you're looking to take your life back, let's start with the simple step of adjusting your self-talk. Stay tuned for the next episode with your host, Lara Jane. Remember to follow the show so you don't miss the next simple step that you can use to feel more confident. And please leave an honest review.